groovy.
Hey, folks, welcome to Horror After Midnight. I am your host, Slinky Jallo, and as always, joined by my good buddy, KC. And let's see, we have a really cool guest with us tonight. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, sir, tell everybody who you are and what's going on.
My name is Royce Freeman. I'm a independent filmmaker in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm a writer, editor, and director, but I do other things as well.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Really glad to have you with us tonight, man. Sincerely. I'm coming from Tampa right now, so that's awesome. Florida. But let's see. If you want, man, I guess jump right into it, Chris, if you have some questions lined up. I usually just off the cuff, so but
Can you tell us a little bit about Freeman Films and how that got started?
Freeman Films is my father was a filmmaker, still is, and we used to live in New York when I was a kid, and I went to watch my dad work, went to sets and went to the office where he worked and did editing and effects and things, and instead of playing with Legos, I played with the the film splicer, and he showed me how the animation computer worked and all those things. So then when I was a teenager, I started telling stories and creative writing and got interested in being more visual and telling the stories for the screen. So I went to film school and then started doing short films. And when I moved to Jacksonville, I actually got hooked up with a bunch of folks that they were always wanting to turn out content. So I got jumped in the deep end of the pool and was constantly. They say if you're always working, your learning curve goes up, and so I was constantly working and making and creating art. So so that's where Freeman Films really started, was when I moved to Jacksonville, Florida. I started doing all those film projects, and my dad actually had retired. So he said that anything I worked on where I had some creative input, he would come on and be my partner. So if I was editing for somebody else, my dad would do all the graphics and effects for free. If I was directing something, and I wanted to edit, he'd still do those things. Or if I didn't want to edit, he would come on and do those things also for me. So Freeman Films is kind of a father-son thing. He doesn't always work on my stuff, but 90% of what I've done, he's helped me with.
That's really cool to hear.
And it's interesting because, I mean, he's 70 years old and his tastes started before I was ever born. And he obviously likes all the classic films. And, much like generational things, my dad's generation grew up on the 50s and 60s rock and roll. And clearly his parents were not into the things that he was into, it because it wasn't that rock and roll kind of movement and the hippie movement. It was a voice of a generation. It spoke to the rebellious and the angsty youth of the 60s and the uncertainty of, they had the Vietnam War and stuff. So every generation has things that speak to them. So the things that I grew up watching in the 90s, Tarantino, Kevin Smith, and stuff like that, those things were kind of, I mean, there was some colorful language, and parents didn't necessarily connect with that stuff. They just saw it as trash stuff. But my dad, he appreciates some of the stuff, but he also thinks that some of the films that informed my youth are kind of, he could do without them. So, but when we work together, it's basically, you're the director, I'll do what you want me to do, but here are my ideas, and sometimes they don't go with what I'm thinking. And sometimes I go with his idea because it's better. But ultimately, he respects me. When he works with me, I'm not his son. I'm the director, and he respects me enough to say, I don't agree with you, but I'm going to do it because this is what you're asking of me. But most of the time, his ideas are better than mine, so I bow to his expertise.
Well, he's got that experience.
Like
Oh, of course. I'd be foolish to say I'm right, you're wrong, and ignore all of his expertise. That would be foolish.
No, that's great. That's really cool to hear, man. Because normally, well, whatever. I'm not getting into it, but yeah, no. How's the film scene in like Jacksonville, say? Because
Well, yeah, Jacksonville is where the first studio in America, back in the Charlie Chaplin days, 100 years ago plus, that's where the Hollywood studio was. And because of the the churches and stuff, they didn't like all the rambunctious the film guys running around and getting with all the girls and all the partying and just all the trouble that it caused. And they sent them packing, and they told them to get out of Dodge. And so they wagon trained their asses all the way to California and set up shop there. And so it's a film community that's booming because we're trying to rekindle a flame that's been gone for a long time. And you have films. I mean, you're down in Tampa. You know, there's films that get shot in Florida, and
all the time. Yeah,
all the time. But they come to Florida. They want to aggregate all the resources and pillage, but they want to bring all the above the line people from elsewhere. So the only people that get paid for their work, you know, like locals, is, you know, menial labor. Where if they really wanted to, and they'd save money on hotels and all kinds of things if they brought the stars into Florida. But pretty much everybody else, they just pay locals. Atlanta is booming because of the Marvel and the Disney stuff and Tyler Perry and stuff. We're hoping that Jacksonville can do the same thing, but I don't think Jacksonville gives the same tax incentives that they do in Georgia and Atlanta. So until it's cost effective, I don't see Hollywood really doing that because they're all about the money and not necessarily the art.
Yeah, very true. I was gonna say, because down here in Tampa, like on Craigslist and on Facebook all the time, you'll see open calls for, you know, people who want to come and work on a movie and yada yada yada. You see it all the time. And then I think it was the dolphin tail, that story with the dolphin with no tail. They shot that in Clearwater Beach, probably 20 minutes from where I am, and that kind of opened it up a little more for more productions to come in. So, but that's cool. I didn't know that about Jacksonville. I had no idea.
There's lots of stuff going on. And the independent film scene, I mean, I'm not saying it's specific to Jacksonville, but what I can speak to about Jacksonville that I know is everybody that does their independent stories, we have stories to tell. And we're the counterculture to obviously, I'm sure if every one of us, if they backed a dump truck of money, we would hold on to our integrity, but I wouldn't call it selling out, but I think we would play ball, you know, if Hollywood
make it worth your while. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But right now we're telling stories that we're telling the stories we want to tell, and with no corporate overhead telling us by committee, oh, you shouldn't say that because it's wrong. And so you don't have to do things by committee, and you can just tell the films you want to tell. I guess it spoils us to a degree because if Hollywood ever came knocking, we would have to acclimate to a different way of doing it. But you know, we all have bills to pay, so I'm sure that we would love the opportunity to get a nice, handsome paycheck to tell a big film.
Oh yeah. Plus, there's no big studio involvement, like you said, changing things around, stuff like that.
Without getting too much into it, the movie I made, somebody there was a Hollywood liaison tried to talk me out of making the film indirectly because I had gone to a film conference and he was trying to talk to independent filmmakers and telling us, because he has a toe in the Hollywood system. And I said, so a movie like Seven that has that shocking ending, the head in the box, you know, all you have to say is the head in the box and people understand if they've seen the movie. Yes. Or if they've seen Family Guy or something that made fun of it. But I said, what if you made a movie that has an ending that it's the only way the movie can end is that ending. But let's say it's not commercial and the studio would decide to change it. They said, if a studio bought your movie, the studio owns your film. They also own it. Let's say they went back and they reshot the ending. They still own the original ending, which means you can never put that ending in another script. They own it. And sometimes, like you hear about corporate people or business people, you know, kind of like roadblocking you deliberately. Some people might buy a film just to take it out of rotation so nobody will ever see it. Let's say if they ever had made that movie and that ending would offend their shareholders, they might buy the movie
just to shelve it.
And to shelve it so it'll never be seen. And then you're screwed. So the guy said, if you definitely want that ending, make the movie yourself or you have no recourse. Because if they buy your movie, they own it and they can change it and whatever. And even when we were making the movie, one guy that was on the producing staff that was helping us, but then he had to, leave the project. He said, "Are you sure you don't want to shoot a backup ending or at least a close up of this person doing a different thing?" And I said, "Nope." And they said, "But why?" I said, "Because when you make a film and then you are, let's say you write it. Okay, so there's 3 stages. You write it, and then whatever's on the page, you go and shoot it. Now you can change that. But once you're in the editing room, unless you have money to reshoot, you are stuck only using the clay and the whole cloth that you created, and that's the only material you have in the editing room to make your film work. If you give yourself an alternative choice, you get to second guess yourself because artists, we are self-loathing. We sometimes get, if we're sitting there editing and we've had too many drinks, we start to have a pity party. We have a pity party.
We're our worst.
And then we look at the film we look at the film we did, and we get to the end and we start second guessing ourselves. What did I make? Oh my God! I wish I had an alternate ending here. But if you don't have an alternate ending, it forces you to remember a year later when you're in editing the same person you were when you wrote it. And you have to live and die by your choices, and you don't have a second choice. So that's kind of where this project came from, was that, by those kinds of things. Someone tried to talk us out of making it because, again, somebody probably would have bought it and shelved it for some of the reasons you were very much aware of.
Where did it come from? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
Like what made you want to write it out and direct it and, make a film?
My first feature movie was called Rapture. It was a thriller that had similar elements to this, but it wasn't like, it's not a remake. It's like, I would call it like a distant cousin, It was a home invasion story, and I had made that film, but it had the spiritual themes in it that I liked, but I also was like, I really enjoyed doing this thriller aspect of the film. So the co-writer and producer of that film said that he wanted to do a film that was just a thriller, that was all the thriller aspect without the spiritual part. But then we got hung up on the idea, but we still want it to be controversial in another way because you want people to remember it. You want the head in the box, ending. And so I was thinking of that, and I had a dream, and when I woke up from the dream, it was an image of a character alone, barricaded, with nowhere to go. And I knew somebody was on the other side of that door, pounding and pleading and desperate to get in there. And I knew that if they made it through that door, the person on the other side of that door would not live. And the person on the other side of that door was pregnant. And I woke up crying. And it was vivid. It was the only time I've ever dreamt something that I ultimately made that I thought was real in that way. And I told myself, like a snowball effect working backwards, who is this person? Why are they there? And why is the circumstances so dire and everything to lead them to the series of choices that they have to make in the story? And my dad as a parent said, well, I'm a parent, so I got to tell you, son, you have to make a shitstorm that is so horrible and artificially create a series of events that's so ridiculous to push them to their choices. Because he says, I'm a parent. I would never make some of these choices unless it was so bad that I saw no way out.
Yeah, so dire. Yeah.
So I had to orchestrate a series of things that, working itself backwards. I was like, okay, well, is she alone? No. Well, she sometimes should have someone to talk to. So I gave her a friend. And then I was like, okay, well, who are the bad guys? Well, there's a guy and a girl. And since the last movie I did, both of the bad guys were men. I said, I want the heavy, the muscle to be the guy, but I want the brains to be a woman. Even though she actually could hurt people herself, she doesn't really need him. He's just kind of helpful to have around. But Zoe is really running the show. I mean, she's actually a Army Special Forces specialist, so she could kick all our asses. So
yeah, she's very, very capable. Yeah, yeah. Wow.
But we orchestrated a series of events to support the trajectory of the story, because we wanted the ending to have the verisimilitude and the truth. If the audience didn't believe the film and where it went, then the whole film falls apart.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what inspired me to make it, was wanting to tell this lady's story, Skylar. I dreamt about her. She felt real, and I wanted to tell her story as if she was a real person.
Okay. All right. You know what? We've talked to quite a few directors, and I've never heard one say that the inspiration they got was assembled that way. That's really cool, man. That's really cool. It's kind of like you took a puzzle apart and just.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's really neat. That's really neat to hear. That's really cool. Yeah.
And I had to create a series of characters that, I mean, it is an exploitation movie to a degree, or at least it harkens back and mirrors the 70s exploitation films. So
Okay.
the characters had to have a little bit of the the one-liners. Sometimes they had to have very few things to say, but be very almost wooden at times, because their trajectory and their focus is laser, so they're not doing a lot of chattiness, like Zoe says very little. And
they're very focused on the task at hand, seems like. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kane, I wanted him to be a big horse's ass. I said, well, if she's saying very little, then he should be someone who won't shut up.
Yeah.
And because she is very serious, he should be somebody that, unless he's killing somebody, he should be just a big oaf, like. And because I'm a big nerd and I quote movies all the time, I said, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I just made a creative child, so to speak? I put my personality as a film nerd into a character that is just a sociopathic bull in a china shop, which I'm not. So I thought it was funny. His dialogue was easy to write because I just kept quoting movies, and he had unlike me, he has no imagination whatsoever. So rather than saying something that he feels, he just says something that someone else felt in a film,
Wow.
and then he's not even good at quoting movies, like in Back to the Future, when Biff says, screen door on a battleship, then he gets chastised for it's a submarine, So I was like, okay, what if we quotes movies and he's even bad at it too?
That's really cool. That sounds like a really great dynamic, man. Like really,
Yeah.
Like in Sin City, there's the two hitmen where it's Fat Man and Little Boy. The little one just talks and talks and talks, and the big one, the oafish one, just he doesn't really say anything unless he's choking the life out of somebody. So yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really cool dynamic you created.
And
So.
I created. There's so many things in the movie that are autobiographical for many reasons. I made Kane's father a war vet because my dad is a Vietnam vet, and because I wanted an unreasonable motivation for him to attack the girl later, even if it's unjustified and he's doing wrong. I had to create like a Rube Goldberg chain of events so that what is his unreasonable reason for wanting to get revenge and attack her? It's like, well, in his own mind, if she didn't run her mouth, then something else wouldn't have happened. So I was like, okay, well, he's got daddy issues. So what if he spares the life of a vagrant in the woods? And what if that vagrant is also a Vietnam vet and reminds him of his father?
Okay, there you go.
And so much so that Zoe says, you put us all at risk. So he made a selfish choice that, if you're looking at the honor code of thieves, he was wrong to save that man's life in the criminal code. In the criminal code, he put the team at risk.
Yeah, it's a loose end, absolutely.
Yeah, a loose end. So I created a lot of loose ends. There's lots of little loose ends in the story that just make the story more interesting.
Yeah.
Making him very handsy and misogynistic is very relevant to the issues at hand that we're facing in the world today, where there's so many women that have been wronged by mostly guys, it seems, but I'm sure there's women that harm women. But basically, when we made the movie, that whole Me Too movement hadn't really come full force. So it was there. It was there all along, but it hadn't hit its social media presence. So when the time it took us, to make the film, and now finally it's going to be out on streaming in the next few months. Now it's more relevant than it ever was. Yeah,
absolutely. That sounds great. Like, I really can't wait for that, man. Really, like, you totally sold me. So
our goal is to get it on Prime. So if it all goes as planned, it'll be on Prime this summer.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, definitely. We'll keep in touch, man. And when it does release, we'll have you come back on, and we can all talk about it and plug it, and make sure as many people see it. Yeah. That's great. That's great.
It's a passion project, and I know that I find myself saying these things, and after I say these things, I realize that anybody who takes paint and slings it onto a canvas in a Picasso way, they claim they're an artist. Just because you do something artistic doesn't mean that a person should pretentiously, I'm an artiste. Like, everything you do has value because you value it.
Exactly.
To the artist person, it does, but there can be a point of pretension where you wax intellectually about what you're doing and make yourself seem too important.
Yes.
So I made a film that meant something to me. It's definitely not for everyone, clearly. And there's also a reason why the end is the end. If that scene was at the beginning, they'd turn off the film. They probably would, because they wouldn't have a reason. There's movies like, as an example, The Hangover, right? The movie starts with something that's 3/4 of the way into the story, and he's missing a tooth, and they say, where are you? The wedding is in an hour, and it's like, we lost the groom. And then they have to flash back to the crazy night of debauchery and bacchanal that got them to that point. And then like Forrest Gump does the same thing. It's like he's on a park bench and he tells the story of how he got to the park bench, and then he finishes the story. If we put the ending at the beginning of the film, they'd have no reason to continue watching, because they're like, oh, this character did this thing. We don't even care about this character, so why are we watching? So I had to make sure we had characters you care about, villains that had weight behind them and were scary enough to put the fear into the character and in the audience, so that by the time you get to the end of the story, you've been in their shoes for 85 minutes. And so
you're really invested now. So now you really want to see what plays out, whether it's crazy or right.
You gotta have plenty of character building.
Yep.
And it's funny is that a director will go back sometimes and tinker with their own work, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes we won't name names, but sometimes a certain filmmaker will go back and tinker with special editions.
Star Wars prequels.
Rito shooting first, all that. And so we had a premiere of the movie in May, and it had, to give you a context, okay, the scripted opening of the movie was a shootout at a gas station. It was the girls going into the gas station for a chili dog and a slushie, and the bad guys pulling over for gas. Kane's pumping the gas. The two girls go inside. Zoe has to use the restroom, and Raven ends up, getting herself a soda and a snack. And Anya is there and starts talking with her, and they flirt. Skylar goes to the bathroom, and that's where Skylar and Zoe meet. Skylar's complaining about being pregnant, which puts the seed into Zoe's mind that this is a woman who is ungrateful and doesn't appreciate the situation she's in. And the store clerk recognizes the group from newspaper headline. They're in the newspaper headline. And when the clerk sees this, it's like a double take. Raven sees it before the clerk, but then ends up with a Mexican standoff. There's just guns pointing at everybody, and a hair trigger situation causes the clerk to die, and the girls are witnesses, so now they have to be taken hostage. Kane wants to kill them. But he doesn't see the pregnant belly of Skylar, so he tries to shoot them both. And Zoe says, "Wait, no, we might need them." But she has her own reasons for all that. Well, we couldn't get a gas station to let us shoot that scene, so it became a very artsy thing. We had thought of, well, like Clerks, them standing outside the store. I said, okay, what if I make the scene only about the girls and not about the villains? And we shot the scene, and it was like, oh, we're going to go inside and check on my folks. And then we heard a gunshot kind of thing. And we had no place to put that scene except the ending, kind of like a Pulp Fiction and an out of order situation.
Yeah, it's not linear. Yeah.
Well, the way it was, the ending, the ending, not the last scene, but the ending you guys saw. Yeah. That scene, after it happened, it flashed to how everybody met. And what it became was it's melancholy, because where every one of these characters ends up.
Yeah.
They're happy in the scene. Mm-hmm. And in real life, it doesn't end well for most of them. So, so where it was very melancholy. And the way it was after the scene, the flashback happened, and then the shower scene happened where the person is crying. So it was in between. And when I sat there and watched the film in the screening room with the premiere audience, everybody was in shock when the big scene happened. But then when they were forced to sit through and listen to jokes for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, even though it was melancholy, but they were restless. You can see they just want to be done. They're emotionally checked out, because once they're asked to accept the finale of the film, they don't have any emotional juice to listen to jokes and stuff. They don't care anymore. Yeah. So I didn't have audience test cards. I didn't do that. But you watch. It's like a joke. If I tell you a joke and you don't laugh, you don't have to tell me the joke sucks. You're not laughing. So I know that's not working. Mm-hmm. So I went back and in the editing, we interspliced that scene in a sporadic way with that chase scene now. And since the chase scene actually is about those two girls specifically, it becomes about those two girls in a flashback way by interspersing how they met up, and then you introduce Skylar, and then when we had the second screening in January, the ending was hard hitting and powerful because it ended on a punch and it went to credits.
It takes your breath away almost. Yeah.
I mean, and it really ended the way it was meant to end all along. Just that flashback that was supposed to be the opening got moved somewhere else. But it's interesting going in and tinkering with your work later. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes you have to just leave it alone, But the movie you guys watched is the director's cut. It is the way it was supposed to be all along.
Okay. See, and that I always think that's a nice touch that directors do when they do it non-linear, like when it's not in order. I really think that's kind of cool, because you see scenes like you're talking about where all their paths intersect, and you just know what's coming, and you're like, fuck, sucks, man, because I know what's going to happen to her. I know what's going to happen to him. So to me, it adds like maybe more depth to it. I think I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, it adds more to the story where it's bouncing
Yeah,
around.
yeah. So
And the villains, I wanted to make a film where every character, every one of the main five people, they make choices at different times, whether it happened before the movie started, like Skylar's speech about not sure if she wanted to be a mother or not, but ultimately she stayed true and stayed the course, and she didn't decide to not be a mother, you know. But every character is a character with gray area choices. You know, Raven doesn't do the right thing for a lot of the movie because she feels a metaphoric gun to her head that she can't do. She's paralyzed by fear. She has many opportunities through the whole movie to do the right thing. There's nobody around. She could do the right thing plenty. And she's just paralyzed by fear, traumatized by the PTSD of the situation. The flashbacks show all the characters, you know, where they came from. I wanted to do so. I used James Bond as an example, even though it's not related to the story. Is when the Gadget Man Q tells you this pen is a grenade. You believe it. He tells you it works, and you just believe that it does. I made all the flashbacks with the characters so far removed from where they end up as adults, so that this, like Kane's father being a war vet, and he's telling his son, because his son's like, "Oh, were you a hero in the war?" He goes, "Some people disagreed," and he says, "Well, I want to be just like you," and he goes, "Be better than me. Don't be like me. Be better than me."
Yep.
And we know that, didn't happen. Same thing with Zoe. When Zoe loses her child in the flashback, the father is a drunkard. But if you listen closely, once she falls, you hear him say, "Baby, no." Because I wanted to create a character that in the moment you meet him, he's a piece of shit. He's a drunk, and he hits his daughter without any restraint. But the moment he makes that horrible choice, and there's consequences to that choice, he himself, even though it's off camera, you hear him scream, "Baby, no," because he realized he fucked up.
Yeah.
Every one of the characters is a gray area. I didn't want to create bad people or good people. I wanted to create people.
Yeah. I totally get that. I like that. You know, because not everybody has a crazy strong moral compass to, you know, do the right thing or do the wrong thing. But yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really good. So
the actress that played Skylar actually said it was very relevant for her to play a pregnant character because she already has two kids of her own, so she knows exactly what it's like in Florida in the summer to be pregnant.
Yeah.
And you know, she says, I just imagined it being even worse because there's no AC. But we actually shot in a house that was miserable to shoot in. So she says, I didn't have to do much acting.
Yeah.
She says I was miserable at, in the scenes, not in real life, but just she goes, my hand was handcuffed in this position for 90% of the movie, and we didn't uncuff her after each take. She goes, just keep my hand, we gave her a pillow, to like rest it so it wouldn't like completely dislodge. But she said, I want to feel the character. So unless we were taking a lunch break or she had to go to the restroom or whatever, she said, leave me handcuffed because I don't want to do much acting here.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that
it lends itself to her being miserable and, yeah, absolutely. Especially in the Florida summer. Jesus Christ. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny is every one of the characters, we did the wardrobe fittings, not realizing or thinking about the weight of the gravity of we're going to be shooting all summer in this hot house. So everybody made choices for aesthetics for what their character would wear because we thought about this. Tarantino said this in an interview, and it always stuck with me. And I try to do it in almost every project they do. People leave the house dressed for what they intend to do.
Yeah.
Not for what actually ends up happening to them. So if a girl ends up leaving the house dressed to impress, and she's wearing pumps or high heels or like boots that have a little bit of a heel, well, those are not meant for running around. Those are not meant for walking too much. You'll get calluses on your feet. They're not. They're meant to look hot. They're not meant for the. So I said, what if I made every character start their day off camera, not having any clue that this was going to occur? So they make all kinds of choices about their wardrobe and their situations that's going to be completely inconvenient and horrible for their situation. That car we used, the moment we showed up on set with it, we were like, it looks wonderful. It looks great. It's a really fly car. But once we shot the stuff where we had the characters get in the back, one person was comfortable. Everyone else had their knees in their chest, because it's a sports car. It's a Firebird or whatever that is. It's meant to be comfortable in the back seat much. So what we did was we were like, well, that car was always designed that it was for the two bad guys and the third girl in the back seat. It was never designed to pick up hostages. Otherwise, they would have had another car. So I said, well, what if it literally is uncomfortable? What if they look ridiculous in that back seat? What if Raven is wearing that god awful flannel outfit? It looks cool. It's grungy. It looks Nirvana and very punk rock. But that thing is going to be miserable in summer. She's wearing high hooker boots. She's wearing Doc Marten boots. She's wearing these legging jeans that don't breathe very well.
Yeah.
They look really cool if you're going inside in air conditioning, but they're not really convenient for the movie. So
running through the woods in the summer. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially down in Florida.
Oh,
it's like
man.
If you watch Star Wars, Lucas said the Death Star and the Millennium Falcon. He says, I want everything in this movie to look dirty. People have been walking on this on the surface of the floor. People have been wearing these outfits. It shouldn't look like they just waxed and cleaned the floor before every scene and everything is shoe polish clean. It should be lived in and weathered and very looks like it's been
chunk of junk in the galaxy. So it looks like a greasy, oily mess. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I took that idea that everything should look like it's been lived in, and you get the impression from Raven's flashback when she steals the flannel shirt from the guy when she kills him. It's a badge of honor. She's wearing that to remind herself, I overcame this. And I actually triumphed over, I killed him. And when we had that scene, she wasn't going to take the shirt originally, but the one who played Zoe, she's a cop, and she said, I deal with special victims crimes. All she goes, wouldn't it be interesting if when she kills him, if he's wearing that same shirt, and she takes it from him, and that's the shirt she's wearing for most of the movie, because that's a badge of honor. And that's something psychologically I never would have thought of as a guy, and B, very few guys go through special victims crimes as the victim. So I can't speak to it from the perspective of understanding what those people go through. And she said, this would be very poignant, and it's a visual thing, and you're not even telling the audience. It's just she takes it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah.
Well, a lot of choices we made that were all based on the actors telling me, I understand what you wrote on the page. I understand what I have to say is going to be putting the characters in checkmate later. So those chess pieces have to move. But I can help you navigate from this scene to this scene in fewer moves, fewer chess moves to get to checkmate if we use some of my life experience. Raven had gone through a lot of stuff in real life. I know Raven. Except for the story elements, I am Raven to a degree. She goes, this is how I have dealt with some of these things. this would add so much richness to these scenes if I did it, if I did this. And so very few times did I say, well, no, this doesn't actually work for my film. I wrote a movie about a bunch of women. The only guy in the story is Kane. So I mean, if we're all being real, what the hell do we know about women? You know, women, we try to understand what they go through, and we navigate in life trying to be compassionate, understanding, but we can't always walk in their shoes. So I tried to let
a lot of the stuff.
I tried to let the women tell me how women would act, you know?
Yeah, no, that's really good. That made me think of the question when you have your actors on set and everything, do you mostly want them to follow the written word on the page, or are you always open to them adding stuff? And like, I get with the women, I completely understand that, but like, for say guys, or just do you have it in your head you want it to play out this way, or are you always open to improv or stuff like that?
As the editor, since I was the editor, I tried my best to at least keep track of the changes they made, so that I made sure to do the same changes every time we shot. So that in editing, it matched from angle to angle or take to take. That way, it's like, wait, they did this.
Continuity. Yeah.
Continuity. Yeah. When we shot, I did some things that person may never notice on the page, even if it's there. They might just do it blindly until the end of the film, with very rare exceptions. And I guess it kind of worked out this way because as the movie goes on, Zoe becomes more unhinged. She has a plan. She's laser focused, but by the end, she's a wreck. So even though she's still trying to keep her cool, on paper, I wrote down, Zoe never uses broken English. She would always say cannot instead of can't, or do not instead of don't.
Speaks very proper, eloquently.
She never uses contractions when she speaks. And what somebody actually said about that was, you created, like in The Shining, how the characters are purposely wooden in some way. They're real, but they're acting stilted, very stylized. And like heightened reality. They're not like overly passionate and touchy feely. They're very cold, right? So I said, well, when Zoe speaks, she should always be calculated and methodical. And doing that by creating extra syllables for her to say, by making her say cannot. It emphasizes the syllables. It emphasizes the like the end of a word or a sentence. If it has a T or whatever, she can emphasize it by having it be a hard consonant, so she can put an exclamation point on the words by emphasizing cannot, a little bit like that.
That's a really cool idiosyncratic thing to put on there. That's really cool. Now,
when we shot most of the movie already with the adult Zoe, we had not already shot the flashback with young Zoe. So when I was casting for the young Zoe, I was like, okay, we already made a certain choice with adult Zoe. Very militant, short hair, tomboy, not acting very feminine and very, sweet. So I was like, okay, what if, because I've heard guys say this, and I tried to use life experience as what I've understood about what guys to go through, and maybe just have it laterally go across the board into the other gender. Is if a guy has a vasectomy or testicular cancer or whatever, he feels that part of his manhood and his vitality is he's losing part of himself. And it can change a person to the point where they're rebooted. They're no longer who they were. It traumatizes them. It can. So I was like, okay, what if when she loses the child, what she was prior to losing that child, what if she's 180 degrees from the adult version of the character? So I said, okay, every choice I'm going to go the complete opposite. Short hair becomes long hair. Tomboy becomes, dresses and feminine. Now, I mean, I said, well, she's playing a character in her 40s, so a teenage version of that, if you track backwards, would be the 90s. I said, okay, well, what would a teenage girl, because I was a teenager in the 90s. I said, well, okay, she was punk rock. She was wearing flannel, grunge, and a leather jacket. She's into that whole punk rock, alternative rock scene. So that worked with that. But everything about her was sweet and compassionate. It breaks your heart when you see that scene. You're like, how did that sweet girl become her? Well, the thing she was holding on to was the lifeline of she was having a baby. And if you remember in the scene, the dad says, why are you keeping this? You're going to go out and you're going to get knocked up again by some guy. And she makes a comment that, do you think I asked for that monster to rip me apart and plant a seed? You're telling the audience she was raped. And that's why she's pregnant. She doesn't want to give, she doesn't want to get rid of the child. Even though she hates how it happened, she still wants to give life and love to everything in the movie. Was just like you were saying, working backwards from the ending. Everything in the movie is poetry in sense that I created two of everything so they would rhyme. If you watch Back to the Future, it's like, well, okay, Marty's going to invent rock and roll, by way of Chuck Berry, but basically he's going to invent rock and roll. So we have to show that he can play. We can show that he can play rock and roll at the beginning. He invents the skateboard, so we have to show him using the skateboard at the beginning. They usually put like whatever you do, like a setup and a payoff for jokes. They always do that. They put cue cards on the board when they're making the scenes. They're like, okay, if this is the outcome, we have to set it up here. So Skylar's pregnant. Well, Zoe is also pregnant. That's why Zoe wants Skylar's child. Kane's dad was a war vet. That's why the other guy's a war vet. So these things are like in pairs, and then they happen for that reason, right? And also, the reason why Raven is accosted by Kane is also because of what happened to Zoe in the past of how she became pregnant. So a lot of those things are there for so they rhyme.
It's pretty cool, man. That's really cool because this happened. This is the reason. So yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. And it shows you crafted it very well. So.
And this is the biggest change that happened in the movie that we were talking about how actors can ad lib and tell you how the character. This is the character you wrote, and I'm playing the character, and me playing that character. This is how I would do this. And how does it work with your plot? When the first person that was cast was the one that played Raven, and I saw her do something else in another project, and I literally said this to her. And it's weird that I said this to her because these are three different characters; they're nothing alike. But I actually said, "You have such range." This other work that I saw you do. I will give you a Sophie's choice. I will give you all three characters. You can be Raven, you can be Skylar, or you can be Anya. You can be any one of those three, and I'm fine with any of those.
Wow.
And she said that she liked all three characters. She had different reasons why she felt she could do any one of them, but she particularly liked Raven for a lot of the choices that we ultimately ended up making. I did very little tinkering with things. I kept trying to tell the actors to come up with little things that were quirky, that were just weird. Like, you ever having a bad day? And you turn your, like a Broadway musical, you start singing about your day. But you're doing it but you're saying how horrible it is, but you're doing it with jazz hands. When she goes in there to light the cigarette and she's talking about how things got the way they are, I said, I want you to make it. No, you don't have to use jazz hands specifically, but I said, I want you to be like, how did I get here? Fuck my life. And she said, okay, so she turned it into a little musical number for like 2 seconds, but she sang that. And I think it gave the character, this little bouncy playfulness.
Again, more depth, little more, you know.
Oh yeah.
So a little more development. Yeah.
And she, as a character, she's checked out also. She knows that she ultimately, at least they blame her for the situation altogether. You know, if it wasn't for her, they wouldn't have had to kidnap these people because, you know, she kind of screwed up a little. And so she's compartmentalizing her feelings so much so that sometimes she's saying things when she's alone that are almost insensitive to the situation because she's trying to, you know, like when cops go on a crime scene and they're making jokes, you know, because they don't want to think about a dead body on the floor. Every one of the characters was trying to create a world inside their own mind. So
well,
that
it kind of separates them from what's going on. You know, it's like a screen, you know.
Yeah, because they didn't want to have to think about the situation they're in. One of the things that when we had the screening, someone said their favorite scene in the movie was when Raven is chain smoking and she's having a nervous breakdown because they said she's just losing her mind. I said exactly, and I didn't even call cut. I told her what the scene was supposed to be and the high points of the dialogue, and that whole scene was improvised based on that. She went on a crazy just banter of. I said, imagine your character is either hyped up on cocaine or your character is very hyped up on caffeine. But any which way, imagine you're very jittery. Everything is, you know, very jittery. Yeah. You're almost schizophrenic in this moment, and you're arguing with yourself. And she totally ran with it, and it just worked like gangbusters there.
Yeah. It's cool to see those ticks come out like that, like when people are trying to deal with something in their own way, and it just comes out in all these different, you know, manifestations and stuff. So yeah, need to see that. So
what were some of your favorite things or observations in the movie that you wondered why it was done or how it was done?
I'm gonna say this: I did like the throwback, you know, to the exploitation kind of thing, because that I'm a huge like Grindhouse fan. And so that came across in, you know, big bright colors. I was just jazzed we got to see it before other people, if that makes me sound like a douchebag. You know, I think that was really cool. But there was a few scenes in it where it was like, that's why I wanted to ask you about the actors and actresses in the movie, because it's like they sold it. They sold what they were doing. Like, yeah. I totally saw and believed what they were going through and what was happening in that moment. So that's why I wanted to ask you about the actors and actresses, like if you let them add to it, or, you know. And it was neat to know the one female was a cop and that she added that part with the, you know, the rape and stuff like that. So yeah, that was really well done, man. Really well done. And then hearing you talk about how you constructed this, you really crafted it very well. And, you know, you can tell you didn't write this like 3 o'clock in the morning at a Denny's somewhere. Like you really put some time and thought into this, and, you know, you crafted a very, very cool film, man. Really. So
yeah. Well, they say art isn't safe, and if you, to quote Mr. Miyagi, if you have to be on the left or the right side of the road to be safe, but if you're in the middle of the road, you're going to get squished. You know, art can't be safe. There's no way this movie would work if the last 10 minutes didn't happen. Basically, you see a lot of movies where, I mean, even Seven as an example. I listened to Fincher and Brad Pitt and all those guys talking about the studio wanted to muck around and change things, and they did rewrites after they had already been signed onto the movie, and they signed on for the dire, grim ending, right? And then the revised ending was like a car chase, and the hero saves the day, you know. Yeah. And they're like, "What the fuck is this bullshit?" You know. And they said this movie is very grim, and a happy ending has to be in a film that deserves it. If a film works its way up to something and then you give them a happy ending tacked on, it just feels out of place. And so when we were all not joking because it was funny, but we all said this movie doesn't deserve a happy ending.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
if the choices that come to fruition at the end played out where, you know, to put it delicately, in a matter of seconds, timing is key.
Yes.
If a person walks into a room 5 seconds earlier, the ending is completely different.
Yeah.
If a character shows up to try to help, you know, it's all timing. So they said, you know, we should not try to make this more audience friendly because it would betray the grindhouse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Very true. Very true.
I really like the fact that you noticed that we were going for the grindhouse because we wanted.
I was raised on exploitation movies, so I picked that shit up right away. Right away.
When we were marketing the film before we had our premiere, I went on a local. If you're in Tampa, you might know there's a thing up here called First Coast Connect, and there's a lady named Melissa Ross that has a radio show, and she interviews people, and she talks about topical issues of the times, and she interviewed us, and I mentioned that even though the plot isn't exactly the same, two movies from the 70s that influenced the grindhouse of the film were I Spit on Your Grave and Last House on the Left.
Yes.
And so when I staged the violent scenes, especially the Raven scene, I wanted it to be that you notice there's no close-ups of either person and then close-ups of the hands trying to rip clothes off. The camera is literally showing it from one point of view. It has, you cut away to Skylar's reaction, but every time it cuts back to the violence, it's just this slightly wide angle shot observing it like a fly on the wall.
Yeah, you're seeing all of it play out. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a movie moment. I literally wanted it to be a fly on the wall watching this happen. Same thing with Spit on Your Grave. He said, I shot the rape scene 5 times from different camera angles, but he says, I never shot it from any close-ups. He says, when a person is barreling on top of somebody, I want you to see their hips and their face and all of them. If I start intercutting close-ups, it becomes, oh, now it's supposed to be sensationalized, and this is a movie I'm watching now. If it's documentary style and it's just a fly on the wall, you don't let the audience get off the hook.
Because you're pushing it in their face. Yes, and with a wide shot, like you said, like to reference, I Spit on Your Grave. That scene with Camilla. I think it's the second time. No, yeah, I think it's the second time they rape her. That's a wide shot, and you see all the guys, and you see the one who's doing the deed and stuff, and it's like you said, it's forcing you to digest it. It's forcing you to watch it. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And the only times you get the the crazy different shots is when she starts going after the guys. Then it becomes a revenge flick, and you're getting all your close-ups and all your different angles and stuff.
You see her hands in the tub under the suds, and it's not a wide angle anymore. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the editing. There were some choices we made that were based on the rhythms of the actors, because I can't just storyboard the movie and like an animatronic, like when people do animation. When animation, they're creating the movements of the characters. The animator is the director, basically, kind of. The body language that the actors were doing dictated to me the rhythms that I was going to cut and how I was going to do it.
Well, there was a good clip, so I can see that as well now that you mention it. Yeah.
And once I did something one time, and I liked that style, and if I did it a second time, I said to myself, well, now this is the style of the film, so now I'm going to do this a lot. In the original editing, the chase scene was just the chase scene. It didn't have those flashbacks. Raven having her breakdown didn't have those flashes, and Raven sitting there at the graveside didn't have those flashes. Once I moved the flashback to where it was, then I went back and I put those flashes in those other two places. I was like, okay, I was looking around for extra footage for something, and I stumbled upon something that I didn't realize I had. We shot the chase scene on the back of an ATV with the cameraman strapped into it, so he was flying down on a dune buggy. That's how we were getting that Steadicam shot on a high speed, vehicle. So I kept listening to what Raven was saying. Is she's running around in her mind? She's running around in circles. She's chasing her own tail. She's going nowhere. So, and I just artistically was like, this is very profound. What if I keep cutting the footage of just her running nowhere? It's not part of the scene anymore. It's just in her mind. And it kept cutting the shots. And lyrically, there was one shot where she stops in the chase, where she actually she stops and she sees the other girl. But there was footage of her when she turns. She's running her hand through her hair as she's turning her head to look. Well, she did the exact same motion in her breakdown rant. So I was intercutting the body language in the chase footage of her with how she was moving in the present time, and it looked very balletic. In the editing, I just added flashes of remembering the person who was in the grave, and it became a stylistic choice. It became this non-linear narrative thing. We already had the flashbacks; that was already in the film, but but adding this other artistic layer of these flashes, and just like at the ending, also remembering all the turmoil. That's why when they're cleansing themselves, it has literally every murder in the film. It has flashes to all the violence. Because they're remembering, I'm so screwed. All this blood is on my hands. All of this. There was some, like every Hollywood movie kind of thing. There was reshoots we did. The scripted opening literally said exterior sky, and the shot looking up at the sky became a shot of Skylar raising into the shot, wiping the puke off of her mouth. And the movie was going to open with her in the woods throwing up, and Zoe's next to her. We don't know who they are. We know she's pregnant, but that's it. We had to do some reshoots to fill out some of the story points and running time. And the original opening had been Skylar in the woods throwing up. And we wanted to drop you in the middle of a story and not tell you why you're here or what's going on, and have you fill in the blanks, right? We started to see that we needed some extra beats, and we were like, okay, well, what if we open with a flashback of a young girl praying and listening to her stepmother and abusive stepfather fighting in the other room, and then there's a little slight poignant moment when he comes in and says goodnight to her, and then she wakes up from the nightmare, and then we reveal them in the car. All that stuff was added later, and then the scene where she retrieves the flannel shirt is also part of that reshoot. We were like, okay, well, we're setting up this asshole, so now we're going to also have that payoff. And one thing that added that scene that did was originally, except for being an ambiguous character and Raven just kind of being on the fence and just not being very proactive until the end, we decided that adding a scene to show that she did a righteous act in the past. Now, it's still cold-blooded because it's not like she defended herself in the moment when something was happening to her. This is years later. It's still murder. It's still murder. It is. You probably get a lighter sentence because of why you did it, but it's still murder. But we added an extra layer of character to her character, to Raven, by having her have this thing that she did. And also explains why she hasn't run, because even like at the end where she's like, why haven't you left these people? And she says, oh, they have something on me. Well, they have two things. Now they have two things. There was always that scene with the cop that they were filming, but I said, well, what if there's two things they have now? They have, the cop scene, and they have this other thing. Again, we wanted to create full characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does. What you said lends itself to them being in the gray area. And to touch on what you had said with the flashbacks, you actually created a very nice aesthetic with those flashbacks. Like it kind of polished the film a little bit. And I don't mean that as it needed it. No, please don't think that. But
No, it's fine.
it's a really cool aesthetic that you did with those flashbacks. It's really neat. Like you kind of did it. It made it unique. I don't know how else to say it. Like I'm giving you praise for it. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's
Now,
very cool.
Because of the grindhouse nature of it, once the editing was done, everything was done with that charter and that mandate of keeping it with that in mind. It's going to be a grindhouse film set in a modern time because there's cell phones, but everything was in my head. I grew up watching those mean-spirited films. Not everybody that was in this is a young cast except for the bad guys, so they didn't necessarily watch that stuff. But if someone said this is going a little far, it's like, trust me, the other films that this is kind of mirroring, they went further. Trust me.
Go watch Last House, man. Piss your pants. Like Krug is insane. Like
yes,
there's not a line he won't cross. So yeah, absolutely.
Now, speaking of Last House on the Left, I liked the remake of that.
So did I.
I will say this: if you edited out of the original film all that goofy shit with the cops,
with the chicken truck, oh my god, yeah.
all the slapstick shit with the cops, if you edited it out of the original film, I would say the original film is light years better than the remake, even though the remake is quite good.
Yeah.
But because the original has that goofy shit, even Wes Craven has said that Last House on the Left was his first movie, and he produced the remake. So he even said, once I got the rights back, I actually wanted the remake to be better than mine. He says the original was done by someone who didn't know what the hell they were doing, and it was still great. He says I wanted that guy that directed it to be someone who was an artistic filmmaker who could put a stamp on it with a vision, who actually knew what they were doing. So I think the remake is a more enjoyable viewing experience overall because it actually doesn't have the goofy shit.
Yeah.
But the original is the original, so it is the raw thing. So I mean, you can't. It's hard to say the remake's better, but it does have. It is executed in a lot of ways better, but the original is the better film.
And it actually predates Texas Chainsaw by I think a year or a few months with a murder going with a chainsaw.
Absolutely.
When the father, I did enjoy the remake with the creativity of the dad in the microwave. That was phenomenal. Like that was awesome. Cool to watch, man. Because if you fucked with my daughter, I would go crazy too. So absolutely,
Yeah. In the remake, I liked the fact that they did get to a fork in the road with the two girls, where one went one direction, one went the other.
Yes.
They set up that she was a good swimmer, and they set it up so that they could actually play out the third act of the film the way they did, where, well, the dad's a doctor. So if the dad's a doctor, he could use him being a doctor to hurt the villains, but he could also use being a doctor to maybe try to help her. And it works out, I think, in a more fulfilling way in the remake in that way. And I don't know if you noticed, but the kid who plays the kid who's the screw up junkie.
The junkie,
The junkie in the remake is Aaron Paul, who is from Breaking Bad and stuff. Jesse Pinkman.
Bitch, that kid. Yeah. Wow, it's been probably 7 or 8 years since I've seen it, so I probably didn't catch it actually. Wow. All right. Cool. Good to know. But
it's weird. It's weird when you watch movies and you see actors that are in these bit roles. I mean, throw a rock in the 70s and 80s, and you see all these major stars that are stars now that they had their first roles. Like Johnny Depp was in Nightmare on Elm Street, Kevin Bacon was in Friday the 13th. Jennifer Aniston was in Leprechaun.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And what's his face is in what is it? Last House on the Left. The guy from Cobra Kai. It was so funny
Oh
to
yeah,
see
yeah,
him as a sheriff's deputy because the whole
yeah.
time
John
I'm
Priest,
watching it, yeah, I'm like sweep the leg, sweep the leg. You know.
and he was also in Rambo also.
That's right. That's right. So, oh yeah, Brian Denny, he just passed away. That's
Oh yeah,
man.
yeah. I heard about that. I grew up watching him in everything. He was in a lot of police
First
procedurals.
Blood.
He always played a. He was in a movie. This is if you haven't seen this series of movies, they only made two of them. It's called FX, and
Yes, with Brian
and
Brian Brown.
yeah,
Yeah.
Brian Brown, who was in Cocktail with Tom Cruise. He played an effects artist, and he was helping these cops do these try to solve these crimes, and it was really cool. Um, and Brian Dennehy was in Tommy Boy, playing Chris
He's in
Farley's
Platoon.
dad. So he had acting, he had comedy chops as well as.
Yeah. I always enjoyed him in First Blood. Like he played such a rotten bastard in First Blood, man. Like, just as the sheriff. So,
Oh
but
yeah, definitely.
I was going to ask you about the location of the film. I know you said it was in Florida. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Oh yeah,
you shoot.
yeah. President mentioned it before. When we wrote the script, I always I never write practically of how I'm actually going to achieve this. I just write it on page. Every time I write any story that takes place in the middle of nowhere or in like a rundown area, I always just picture Evil Dead, a fucked up cabin in the middle of nowhere, or cabin or cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote it, I just wrote it as a dingy, rundown, not lived in place. And I was having a hard time finding a location because you need a location that's going to let you shoot there for weeks, on off weekends and let you do things to it, and we didn't have as much money to build a place or pay someone to destroy their home or anything like that. And one of our film friends is this hard rocker guy, and his house is just gnarly and in a cool way, but it's gnarly. And we basically, he said, you guys can shoot at my house. And we shot there off and on for 6 months, every weekend, every other or every weekend for months. Everything you see in the movie, none of it we didn't do any of that. I mean, we brought in some furniture. We brought in a couple of tiny little furnitures, like the dining room area where where everybody's sitting and talking. That table we brought in, but other than that, the couch room with the holes in the furniture and the holes in the wall, and the ashtrays overflown, and just in general, none of that was production design. It was all that way.
Wow. You have to dress the set at all.
We were able to do things in that house we would never have been able to do. And talking about budget, everybody did the movie for lunch. Everybody took back end deferments that if the movie makes money, we all share in the profit. We put money, I put up money to be able to get props and some and feed everybody every time we shot. So we had some budget, but they call it sweat equity. Everybody took their time and put it into the resources of the production value, but we all took a risk making the film, and nobody had egos about it.
Sounds like everybody really believed in it. Everybody really liked it and wanted to be involved in it. That's great.
One final question. I noticed there was a necklace with a big S on it. Was that like a nod to Texas Chainsaw?
Wow, dude, I could pick that up, man. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, one of the girl characters is wearing it the entire film.
Yeah, wow.
If you're talking about the one with the glasses and the hoodie and the beanie cap, or are you talking about Raven with the flannel shirt?
I believe it's Raven, the one girl that's with the bad guys.
Okay, she's wearing a Dreamcatcher necklace around her neck, and one of the other necklaces is something that she owns that is part of just her. She always wears it, Same thing with the bracelets on her arm. She never takes those things off. Those things she wears those right now to this day. You know, the necklace and the bracelets were things she brought to the table. They had nothing to do with.
Okay.
I picked out the wardrobe. I picked out the wardrobe for her, and other than that, when she showed up on set, she came out of the other room dressed, and she says, "What do you think?" I said, "Don't change anything."
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, no, it looks awesome. Yeah.
So if it looks like an S, it's a coincidence, but it wasn't planned.
Yeah, it looks like a Sawyer.
We'll just chalk it up. She's a Sawyer. She's a Sawyer.
She's a Sawyer. That's right. She's a Sawyer.
Yeah, her cousin's Leatherface.
But
just roll with it.
But I did, and also the one last thing, and to bring it back to family and Freeman Films, there was something that was done in the performance and in the editing that I did and the actress did at the end, the last shot of the movie, where the character's in the shower. Well, the body language was them looking fourth dimensionally through the world in front of them at a point in time, a fixed point in time of either the past or where they think their future will go. And they have they kind of sink into submission. They kind of shrug and they look down as if something's in their mind, like they see something. Well, there wasn't anything they were really looking at. They were just in their mind. They saw their future or their past, and the editing, I showed that to my dad, and my dad did all the color correction and all of the post work of the sound and the mixing. All that was done by him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I edited and directed it, but I didn't do any of the post work. The body language of the actress dictated a choice we made at the end to add a piece of sound that might inform where the story might go after the story is over. And her body language of looking at a fixed point in time inspired us to add a sound that now she actually is reacting to seeing something or hearing something that's about to happen.
Yeah, it's not ambiguous. Yeah.
So we actually added that just completely based on the body language that the actress was doing. We created, this is where the story's going right after the credits. You never see it, but you hear what is about to happen.
Well, absolutely, because then your gears are spinning because you're just like, well, it could go this way, it could go that way. Like it kind of, fans itself out to anything could happen, and your imagination can run wild with it. So absolutely.
Yeah,
it's really cool. It's really cool.
And the last thing I want to plug is that anybody who wants to, and you can put the link in your description of your video. On Facebook, if you search Freeman Films, there's actually a couple of companies that call themselves that, but it's Facebook / filmmaker Royce Freeman is the link, but it's Freeman Films, and the logo is the 2 F's in the black and the gray. And on there you can see trailers and other short films that I've done. And you can look me up on Vimeo as Royce Freeman also, and it has a lot of my work there too. Sounds cool.
This has been great, man. This has really been great. I can't thank you enough for sitting here and bullshitting with us.
You fellas have a nice evening.
You too. Have a good evening and stay safe, brother. Stay safe.